This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of switching your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling. Harness the best converting checkout and same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Stop leaving sales on the table. Discover why millions trust Shopify to build, grow, and run their business. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech23.
This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
LinkedIn presents.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Kevin Gausch about change management and continual improvement mindset. Kevin Gausch, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Jonathan, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It is a pleasure to be with you today. Joining us from outside of Philadelphia, I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about successful change management, frontline workers, and tech, and how all of that in the digitation process can work together to create really dynamic, continuous improvement mindset and climate and culture within organizations. As we get started, I wanted to share Kevin's bio with everybody. Kevin has 16 years in the construction industry with experience in management, quality, project management, and continuous improvement. He spent 13 years at a utility contractor at Henkels and McCoy, where he worked his way up from a regional management role to director in their shared services corporate office. He made the jump from construction to software when the company was bought just over a year ago, and he was a customer of safety culture prior to coming to work there. And his passion and mission is to empower frontline workers to improve safety, quality, productivity, and job satisfaction. I love all of that. Super important. I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. Anything else you would like to share with me or the audience by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
I think the only thing I could add to it is, lean continuous improvement. It's prevalent. It's prevalent in pretty much all industries, especially manufacturing. Having that applied to the construction industry is somewhat unique. It's kind of a niche within a niche. So there's probably, for those out there that are kind of have that construction slant on things, this may be something that's not as easy to come across as some of the more manufacturing examples that are out in the ether, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wonderful. And I always love taking things from a slightly different niche or perspective. Let's go ahead and dive on in and talk about kind of an overarching framework for successful change management from your experience. We can lay that foundation, and then we can move into talking about continuous improvement mindset and some of the pitfalls and obstacles that organizations might face and how we can overcome those.
That'd be great. I think when you start off, right, with continuous improvement, the most important thing to consider is people, right? It's people, culture, trumps everything every time, right? And so when a company goes to roll out a new initiative or to say we're going to start doing continuous improvement, whatever that means, uh, a lot of times they do it from a top-down kind of cost-oriented perspective, and they don't take a step back to think, what are the people that this is going to most greatly affect? How are they going to perceive this? How are they going to take to it, and how is it going to affect them, right? And so first and foremost, every time, all the time, you've got to talk to the people, I'll say in the field or on the front lines or, kind of at the tip of the spear when it comes to the processes that you're ultimately going to try to improve. These are the people that live in them every day. And so you definitely want to include them on the front end of any conversation you're having around continuous improvement.
Yeah. Are there any overarching types of change management frameworks that you've utilized over time? It's okay if there aren't. I mean, personally, I like to be a student of different frameworks, but I don't find any one framework to be, my gospel or anything like that. But I'm just curious if there's any driving types of philosophies or frameworks around change management that have influenced you.
Yeah, so I first was introduced to continuous improvement from the lean perspective, right? So we took Toyota production system and kind of translated that to construction, right? And from there, and kind of the way my career went was I really liked it as a discipline. So I dove in and got the certification, and then I moved on and got certified in Six Sigma. I went through the black belt certification. Me personally, I think everything seems to be some kind of derivative of those two or a combination of those two that's kind of followed suit afterwards. I'm not a zealot of either one of them, to be truthful. I think they all have something positive to offer once you take all the duplication out of it, right? There's good pieces of all of it. Both of them, kind of going back to the first comment I made, start with culture, right? Yeah. I just think that companies in general aren't all that good at leading with that, from a leadership standpoint. And I get it. It becomes about cost very quickly and ROI, and you know what I mean? Like we're going to make this investment. They use terms like investment in lean or continuous improvement or Six Sigma, where the investment should be the people.
Yeah. And I wholeheartedly agree that the investment should always be the people. I definitely come from like an employee centric kind of a framework and model and philosophy in how I approach these types of topics and issues. So what you just said really resonates with me in terms of that kind of a commitment and overall investment in the continuous improvement of people. And it seems like, the rate and pace of change has increased so much in recent years, partly driven by technological disruption and innovation, but also just sociocultural, geopolitical, like all these things, right, going on that are just forcing us to adapt and change more rapidly. And how do you do that? Like the traditional change management approaches, that were taught in business schools in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, great perspectives, but in and of themselves, often they don't have the capability to allow us to be in a state of constant readiness for the type of change that happens in the modern world of work and the modern environment. And so that's why, the focus on continuous improvement mindset really resonates with me, because I think we need to create cultures within our organizations where everyone is just understanding that continual disruption is part of the game. Like we're constantly learning, we're constantly growing, we're constantly improving, we're iterating rapidly, we're trying things. Not everything's going to work. That's okay. And that's a significant mindset shift, I think, for a lot of people to be able to wrap their head around that kind of an environment. So in the past, where we talk about change management initiatives and resistance to change and people, retrenching and digging their heels in and not being willing to change, like we don't have that luxury of dealing with resistance to change now. Like you just have to have people who are ready to embrace change from a continuous improvement kind of a perspective, I think. And if you can't, you're just going to become obsolete. You're just not going to be relevant anymore very rapidly, because the world is going to pass you by as everyone else is changing.
I've heard that a company's ability to change is its number one predictor of viability, right? You always hear the Blockbusters of the world as an example, and Nokia, so on and so forth, that they just had the blinders on to the evolution of the industry and the speed at which it evolves. And so creating, as you said, a culture, which is 100% true, right? A culture of where everybody is bought in to having continuous improvement, not be something that's done to them, for one, and not something they do in addition to the work that they do from 9 to 5, but how they do their work. And when you go back to the traditional approach to continuous improvement, where you've got a black belt or a consultant or even an internal consultant, which I found myself in that role many times, and where it's my responsibility to, let's say, go into a business unit and find the waste and eliminate the waste. And the resistance to that. And what I truly think is the people aren't resistant to change necessarily. They're resistant to the way we go about it, right? So I'll give you an example. I was meeting with one of the business unit managers, and I said, we're the lean guys. We're here to help, right? We're from corporate, and we're going to help you find ways to drive cost out and be more efficient and all those wrong things to say. And he said, well, look, we already do that. And I was like, well, you probably don't. And he said, well, let me show you what we're doing, right? And he gave an example of utility company, and they had to remove manhole covers. And he said, the way we do it, we used to do it is we had this hook on a handle, a short handle, and we would, bend over, we'd hook the lid and we'd, yank it off. And it was hurting our guys' backs. It was heavy. It was so on and so forth. So we created this tool, and we took a pry bar, we welded a hook onto the end of it, we put a little lever on the middle of it, and we were able to quickly and easily peel it off and pull it back. No one gets hurt. It takes 10 seconds. And I said, okay, right, like you win, right? You do it. And the problem from a management standpoint is, well, we didn't quantify it, we didn't capture it, right? And maybe there's an argument to be made for not being able to share that best practice with other business units. I could understand that. But when you go to quantify your ROI and continuous improvement, and it's almost like, well, they don't get credit for that because that wasn't part of the project. They're people, I just want to get out of their way. I may help them with some tools or a way to maybe facilitate continuous improvement within their business unit. But that's not something I want to mess with, right? They've got frontline workers seeing a problem, coming up with a solution, and management supporting the efforts. They've already arrived. They just didn't know it yet.
Yeah, I really like that, and great example. You kind of started to touch on it and allude to it a bit, but let's talk more specifically about some of those main obstacles, the roadblocks, the minefields, that we're navigating as we're trying to help our company develop this kind of continuous improvement mindset and culture. Because it sounds great. I think anyone listening is like, yeah, I would love that. So, but doing it is something entirely different, even if you buy into it and you think that that's a good idea. So what are the obstacles you've seen, and how can you start to overcome those?
So I think number one, part of the mistake of traditional continuous improvement approaches were that you had the others, right? Us as continuous improvement professionals were the outsiders coming in to tell the people who do the work how to do their job better, right? That was the perception of it. We had certifications. We may not even know the work, but we know the methodology, right? So unfortunately, a lot of times people in that situation, I could probably put myself in this bucket at some point in my career. You felt the need to prove yourself. You felt the need to make sure that you were respected. And so you try to come across in a certain way. And just the fact, number one, that you're an outsider works against you. Number two, you don't know the work. It works against you. And number three, you're probably a little arrogant. And all that works against you. And so there's an immediate wall that comes up. So I think the first problem, the first roadblock is having some differentiation between the coaches who are supposed to help the people along the journey and those that are kind of coming in to sort of make their mark, right? Prove their worth and so on and so forth. That's a problem. Another barrier, I think, is just, it's always leadership, right? I think everything, if you want to find the source of a problem, you can always pretty much pin it on leadership, whether it's their tolerance of things that shouldn't be tolerated, or their, making decisions that affect people without considering the people, or whatever it may be. Getting the frontline workers to own the solutions to the problems and the innovation of those solutions and the implementation of those solutions with guidance from a coach, rather than, and I've seen this before, rather than sort of the continuous improvement professional owning all of the kind of the day-to-day tasks of trying to drive results. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that works very well if that's our approach. So creating an environment that fosters, a commitment towards continuous improvement, which fundamentally, I think at its core requires us to create a psychologically safe environment where people can try stuff and it doesn't need to even work. When I think about design thinking and rapid iteration and experimentation, like that needs to become a part of what every organization does. And that is a part of the continuous improvement mindset. When you create that psychologically safe environment, it starts to reduce the resistance that people have, because they just see like, oh, I can try something cool. It actually becomes exciting and invigorating, because you're not stuck in just doing things because that's the way you've always been doing it. But people have creative ideas all the time. And in most organizations, most of the time, traditionally, those have been squashed because you're just like, nope, that's not the way we do it. Do it this way, and so then very quickly people just kind of stop even thinking creatively about how to do processes better, or change systems, or whatever, or your example of the tool that that they create or whatever. All of that will help us to not only improve better the next time, but it also continues to, it's a reinforcing process to help reduce resistance. Let's talk a little bit more about digitizing processes in the workplace, to be able to reduce resistance, to help people to recognize the value of the changes that need to be happening. How can we start to build more of that in?
I think this kind of ties it all together if done right. So in my experience both at Henkel's and with safety culture that I'm with now, and the overlap with the tools and the platform that we used, it was a way to digitize a lot of our processes. And one of them was with our gas workers. We were able to document the work that they would do throughout the day. And so before we would fill in the hole, we'd have a picture of what's in the hole. Okay. And the importance of that is, if our customer were to come in and dig it up and find a problem, we would have the ability to show them we did what we were supposed to do at the time. Okay, so it was kind of insurance really for our company, which was a driving factor at first. But from a buy-in perspective in the field, it gave them personal protection against being accused of doing something wrong when they didn't, right? And so we were successful in getting this implemented because we approached it from a what's in it for you, right? The old WIFM approach, but it works, right? Like we went to the field and said, this is what we're thinking. What do you think it should look like, right? How would you put this together? What should the process be? What questions should we ask? How should we document it, right? And the platform allowed for the flexibility to kind of customize things in that way, so that when it came time to implement the new process, pretty much everyone that this affected had already seen it, touched it, given input to it, knew the benefits of it to them. They didn't care about the benefits to the company. They cared about, how is this going to protect my job? And that's the perspective that we took with them. And it worked, and it took off, right? And it became a best practice within the company. It actually spread to a lot of our competitors because our customer shared it with them. So, you lose kind of the competitive advantage at that point, but, so what? It's kind of to the benefit of the industry. So that was really the big turnaround for us, right? But what was funny was part of the process was, the foreman would take a picture of certain aspects of the job. One of them was you had to take a picture of a pressure gauge, and one person wasn't taking that picture. And so because we had this technology in place, we were able to see that they weren't taking the picture. And so I called the foreman and I said, hey, how come you're not taking the picture of your pressure gauge? And he said, well, my pressure gauge is broken. I said, well, why is your solution to that problem? Don't take the picture. Why don't you get your pressure gauge fixed? And he said, I told you guys 2 months ago my pressure gauge was broken and no one fixed it. And I was like, it's so perfect, right? Like thank you, right? It's a shame it took us 2 months to kind of let this resurface. But thank you for holding us accountable for the problems that you would otherwise get blamed for, right? It's management's fault, it's leadership's fault. And technology, to me, is a way to hold leadership accountable. Because if you're going to put this in the hands of the front line and you're going to say, okay, we're going, this is to help you do your job. This then gives us visibility into our own shortfalls and where we need to spend the time fixing kind of our stuff more so than putting it back on the field to fix theirs.
Yeah, I love that example. And it illustrates too the importance of the frontline worker in this whole process, the continuous improvement loop that will allow this to occur. And there has to be that mutual shared accountability to develop the trust. And when you do that, that also, by the way, helps reduce resistance. It helps, it just reinforces everything we've been talking about. And so often, far too often, organizations take an approach around change that, it's top down. You have the C-suite executives, even middle management. They then go to the frontline workers and say, this is what you need to do. And it doesn't really make sense, or it doesn't really fit with what they do day in and day out, or they've tried that already, or, all these things that nobody bothered to talk to them or to get the input. And so just making that a part of the constant loop is so essential to make all of this work well.
So companies have to get past the us versus them mentality of management and field, right? It's us. All too often the enemy is within, right? When you think about this and how, if management who doesn't do their due diligence and just puts a process upon the front line to then go execute, and they know that pushing back is futile, so they say, got it, boss, let's watch this crash and burn. And it does. And then, you know what I mean? Like, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so you need a common enemy, right? And that needs to be someone outside the company, whether it's protecting our market share or kind of guarding against competitors getting into our space, or, whatever it may be. But you need a common cause to rally around that everyone knows how they contribute to it, right? For the benefit of all, but then also how they personally are going to benefit from it, whether it's job protection, whether it's their job satisfaction, whether it's the quality of life that they get to experience as a result of the changes. Technology can't add more to their plate. It's got to make what they're currently doing easier, and then hopefully have some other added benefits that are kind of tangential to that. But everyone has to win, not just the P&L balance sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, this has just been a really great conversation. I know at the time I need to let you go here in just a minute, but before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, your team, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Oh, sure. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Kevin Gausch. I don't know what my LinkedIn link is, but I'm pretty easy to find. I work for Safety Culture. Final thoughts on today is just, you need to make sure that anyone that's affected by any kind of change has their voices heard, and they get to play a part in what that change looks like. It can't be predetermined ahead of time and then backed into. You have to go into it with an open mind, an experimental mind, a theory to prove perhaps, but with the understanding that you could be wrong and there could be a better way. And then make sure that everyone that has the expertise and is affected by it has a chance to have their voices heard.
Yeah, I love it. Kevin, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Kevin can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.